Here's how you know I'm a little nuts. You know those idiots who stand outside waiting in line in the cold just after dawn so they can rifle through a stranger's stuff at an estate sale when it first opens? I'm one of those idiots, and here's why. Sometimes, if you're really lucky, or pushy, you can end up with treasure. And that's what happened about 2 weeks ago. I got this beautiful Pioneer CT-F505 cassette deck. It is in almost perfect condition, and I am really excited to share it with you. So let's get into it. Finds like this are what make estate sales so exciting. In addition to this cassette player, my wife and I also managed to grab this Pioneer SX790 and this still in box, never used FD270 Sony Watchman. Now, I plan on doing a video about both of these, or at least a short and a video, but since the amp is not working perfectly, we're not going to go over that right now. It still needs to be fixed. I'm not 100% sure what's wrong with it because I haven't really had time to mess with it, so we're just going to put a pin in that and set it aside for now. But if nothing else, at least it came with instructions and a schematic. That said, let's look at this thing because it is quite a beauty. Now, this is the CT-F505. The first thing I want to point out is that it is the sibling to the CT-F500. The difference, as far as I can tell, is the color of the faceplate. This one is black, the 500 is the silver version. They also did that with the receivers. By that, I mean they differentiated the colors with unique model numbers. I think it's great that you had the option to make a match. Now, when I first grabbed this at the estate sale, it was obvious that the belt was a little bit loose. It played, but it took a few seconds to spool up. Truthfully, I was lucky I could even try the thing out. Those places are chaos in the mornings, and finding a place to plug it in without people crawling all over you is somewhat of a challenge in its own right. Fortunately, even though the belt was loose, it did run, which meant nothing had turned into black goo. There isn't really time to sit and test stuff fully before I buy it. We kind of just have to make sure it turns on and take the gamble. Fortunately, the gamble paid off. This thing is practically perfect. The only problems are very minor cosmetic things, a tiny little scuff or scratch here or there, but otherwise no issues that I can see. I did have a minor panic attack while writing the script though. I thought the record function was totally screwed up and spent half an hour trying to figure out what had happened until I tried using a different tape. Yeah, turns out some cassette tapes use the same foam pads as 8-track cartridges, and those deteriorate, so you don't get contact with the read head anymore. Something to watch for, I guess. So, faulty tapes aside, let's take a look. The faceplate is of beautiful brushed aluminum. All the labeling paint is still intact, and it's really clean. The power button's on the far left. When you turn it on, you're greeted by a pair of incandescent bulbs that light up the VU meters with a nice warm glow. The transport controls are the big piano key style levers that raise the tape heads up to the tape. You can really feel the mechanism when you press on them, and the clicks are satisfyingly tangible. You have your rewind and fast forward on the left, record and play in the center, stop eject on the right, and next to it, the pause key. The rewind and fast forward seem to be about average speed, not the fastest or slowest that I've encountered. To rewind a single side of a 60-minute tape takes about 1:34 seconds. Playing a tape is simple. Open the cassette holder by pressing the stop eject key. They call it a kangaroo pocket. I'm for it. I like that term. Just insert your tape into the slot on the door with the exposed tape facing downward. When you close it, that will align it with the cogs. Remember, the tape spool from the left side onto the right side, so make sure the empty tape spool is on the right for this machine. Most deck-style cassette players will be like that. Once the tape is playing, it will continue until it gets to the end and then stop on its own. To stop it yourself, just hit the stop key. This will stop any function. The pause key, on the other hand, will only affect the play function. The fast forward and rewind will override it. Pausing the tape, while functionally the same as stopping it, is crucially different in one key way. When you stop, you bring the entire mechanism to a halt, including the electronics. Pausing it only suspends the motion through the transport, keeping the motor spinning and the circuitry alive, which is most useful when you're recording. When the tape is playing, the two big VU meters will bounce with the amplitude of the signal on the tape. Above them, the tape counter will spin. It has a reset button next to it, so you can set it back to 0 when you need to. This machine comes with Dolby noise reduction. To activate that, you would hit the Dolby NR button. I love that they have a little dedicated panel in the display just for the green Dolby indicator LED. There's also one for the record, which you'll see when we record a tape. And this is my favorite bit. I love the quote in the manual for Dolby. It says, "This results in a tremendous reduction in the amount of tape hiss, which is so irritating when you are playing back a tape." Geez, manual guy, tell us how you really feel. There are 3 tape type settings. STD, not that kind, it means standard. Then ferrochrome, which sounds like something from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And finally, chromium dioxide. Now, here's where it gets a little weird. In 1979, the IEC started a standard for tape formulations. By the end of the cassette era, we ended up with 4 tape types, which referred to their recording bias, or how easily you could record onto them. Types 1, 2, and 4 are very common, both in terms of settings on the machines and the actual physical tapes. I've seen all 3 of those in thrift stores. But type 3, which is ferrochrome, is a lot more rare, and this machine actually has that setting. Even weirder is that they placed the type 3 button in between type 1 and type 2. And while the logic for that makes sense because it was meant to be sort of a combination of the 2 biases, it makes me a little bit crazy to see it out of order like that. The tape type buttons are meant to be selected manually for the tape types, but Chrome tapes have an additional hole in the top that indexes to a little lever inside the machine, which will automatically engage the Chrome tape setting. So let's talk about recording. I did a video about making a mixtape using an Onkyo TA2022, and if you've never recorded a tape before, I'd encourage you to go watch that. We're not going to go into detail here, just the nuances of this machine specifically. First of all, you want to make sure your tape is recordable. There's a little tab that covers the right protection hole on every blank tape, which allows it to be recorded. Pre-recorded tapes have a hole that engages that right protection. Once the tape is recorded, you can break the little tabs off so you don't accidentally record over them. Additionally, it's possible to record over pre-recorded tapes if you cover the hole with a piece of like Scotch tape or something if you don't have another option, or if you just really want to rickroll someone. To record a tape on this machine, I find it easiest to advance the tape past the leader by just playing it for a couple of seconds, then stopping. You can see when the leader ends on the spool. Then I hit pause and press play and record together. It won't do anything if you just press record. This engages the inputs so you can see your recording levels. It also engages the red record light that we talked about earlier. To adjust the levels, you would turn the big knob on the right. It's coaxial, so you can adjust the right and left independently. Now with this particular machine I have, it seems to record a little quiet. No doubt there's a capacitor in there that's getting tired, so to make a nice sounding recording, I find it seems to work better if I allow it to peak into the red a little bit more than the manual suggests. Once the levels are satisfactory, I reset the counter and disengage the pause lever. You are now recording. You can record from 2 input sources, the signal from your amplifier or a stereo set of microphone inputs here on the front. These are capable of running an unpowered microphone, but will also work fine with a powered one like this shotgun mic I'm using now. It's worth pointing out that plugging something into the microphone jacks automatically turns off the signal coming from the amp, so you can't record both at the same time. Finally, there's the headphone jack, because there's always a headphone jack. Somewhat frustratingly though, you can't control the volume output from the headphone jack, and it's honestly a little loud. It's probably better with full-size headphones instead of earbuds, but I don't have over-the-ear headphones anymore. They already sold at the vintage market. So let's flip it around to the back now that I think we've covered all the functions. Not a lot going on back here, just 2 pairs of stereo RCA jacks, an output for playback and an input for recording. These would be connected to the corresponding inputs on your amp. Output play would hook to the play jacks on your amp, and input record would be hooked to the record jacks. Also, since this is only 13 watts, you could plug it into the back of the amp for power rather than the wall if you're short on outlets. So let's open it. Pioneer is adamant about not opening it. They have a whole long warning in the manual about it, which we're of course going to ignore. To get it open, it's just 4 screws, 2 on the right and 2 on the left. Then you can remove the shell, which they call a bonnet. The main thing I want to point out here is the tape transport assembly. 2 things specifically. Number 1, that giant heavy flywheel. That's partially why it doesn't have any really noticeable wow and flutter. But the other thing is the belt. This large flat belt is the one that I replaced. It's actually very easy to change. You don't really have to disassemble anything. There's one small belt in the way. You can just pop that off and set it aside, although I'd put on a new one since you've already got it off. Then, if you look down here, there's a little white plastic screw with a hex head. I think that's there to keep the flywheel in the right place, and it's the only thing that's stopping you from threading the belt around the flywheel. Just back that little guy out about 2 millimeters, and you can slip the old belt off through the gap and the new one on. I ran across a set of dental picks, and I find them very helpful in situations like this as well. Once the new belt is on and seated, just screw the little stopper back into place and you're good. I'd keep track of how many turns you did and try to replicate it in the other direction if you can. Then just pop the other little belt back on and you're good. Now, I'm not going to mess with the other belts for now. That does require a fair amount of disassembly, and these are just passable enough for the time being that I'd really rather not risk messing something up by pulling it all apart. So I'm just going to leave it and put the bonnet back on. It's not ideal, but they work for now. One thing about the lid, there's a little lip on the front edge that you have to make sure slides down into a groove, otherwise it will not close properly. So that's it. That's the Pioneer CT-F505 stereo cassette deck from 1978. I hope you guys enjoyed that. This one's dedicated to all of you who have been consistently watching my stuff and leaving such nice comments. You guys are awesome and I love reading all of it. Thank you. It means a lot. So I will see you next time. Keep thrifting and stay metal.